Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
This is Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, episode number 298.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, and this is part one with Kevin Wilson from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Kevin and his wife, Heather, run Alberta Hunting Adventures, as well as they have a Canadian Outdoorsman TV show available through their website. Kevin is a noted writer. He's been in the outdoor industry for over 20 years, has hundreds of articles, award-winning articles. Sit back, folks, and relax because you are going to hear some great insights of hunting north of the border in the cold Canadian winters, but home of mature, big bucks. Hey, listeners, don't forget to text 33444 Food Plot for your free Food Plot ebook. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, Bruce Hutchin. And hey, folks, we're heading north of the border, eh? We're going to join Kevin Wilson up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Bruce.
Now, Kevin is an outdoor writer, a prolific outdoor writer in Canada, and he also has an online show, Canadian Outdoors. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, Canadian Outdoorsman TV.
Outdoorsman TV. So, Kevin, let's jump in and let's talk about your outdoor writing and how you're sharing the outdoors through your TV program.
Sure, yeah. Bruce, I've been writing for, I guess, over 25 years now for lots of different U.S. and Canadian publications. And, one of my priorities, I guess, has always been to bring authenticity and facts to my readers. I write several columns and lots of freelance pieces and feature articles and that sort of thing. But really, my priority has always been to kind of bring my enthusiasm to readers and teach them how to do what I do.
Now, how did you get started? I mean, 20 years at anything's a long time. So what was the beginning?
Well, you might laugh at this, but in university, a lot of my buddies, they knew I was pretty passionate about hunting, and they said, man, you got some neat adventures and neat stories to tell. You should try writing for a hunting magazine. So I did that, and literally within a couple of months, I had lots of different magazines phoning me and asking me for material, and I actually strategically avoided English classes in university because I was afraid to write. And lo and behold, I guess it all worked out pretty well. They tended to like what I do, and fortunately, I've been able to pick up quite a few national communications awards. So, I guess I'm doing something right.
Now, how do you do that? I mean, you have an adventure, you have an experience, you view something. Now, how do you take your own experience and mold it so obviously, people are very accepting of your work and reward you for that? What makes that different? Where's that passion and drive come from?
It's certainly. Excuse me. It's certainly an enthusiasm for what I do, but more than anything, it's a lot of times it's reader feedback. It's people saying, "Hey, thanks for sharing that with me. I tried what you said, and I tried what you did in conveying your story, and it actually worked for me as well." So I kind of get a buzz off of helping people succeed.
Yeah, and by you succeeding, vicariously, as we talked about in the warm up, I wasn't able to hunt. I had shoulder surgery this fall, so vicariously, I had thousands of opportunities to just on Facebook, social media, and just through my own crew in Wisconsin. We'd do Facebook Lives. They'd be in the tree stand. Bruce, he's coming up the ridge, and I'm sitting in the box stand, and he's heading over to Myers, and then he's going to come up through underneath the Taj Mahal, blah, blah, blah. I'm right there sitting in the window, and it was a great experience. And I said, man, we should have recorded all that. That would have been good content.
Yeah, I'll tell you, with this whole advent of text messaging as well, it's amazing. I sit and communicate with a lot of my buddies in the same way, not just through social media. Well, in fact, also through social media, like almost in real time, but text messaging especially, it's amazing how fast information gets around.
Yeah, the other thing is, selfies, sitting in a tree stand and the owls are hooting, and if you can capture that, it's great. And then you take the selfie at dawn, and then at lunchtime when you're napping, at least I nap, and then when the sun goes down, or when you see bucks that come in that you're not gonna take, and then you just share it, and that's one thing I think about social media is really transcended the ability of us to all connect. And a guy with Killcliff, Michael Heil, talked about being at a campfire in camp, and there were a number of named people, and then there were just friends and stuff. And he said it didn't matter, who anybody was. We all were on common ground when we're on that campfire. When we're in hunting camp, we're in in the cabin. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the common ground thing for sure. That's it's interesting, and you probably experience the same thing. I have tons of really good friends that, I won't talk to them from 1 week to the next throughout the year, but hunting season, we are in constant communication, whether it's electronically or on the phone or even in person. And, I mean, they come from all walks of life, but immediately, as soon as the season opens, those communication lines are open.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and those that look at us and say, "You hunt, why? Why do you do that?" And you could write for the rest of your life, and I don't think you'd ever really convince anybody because they have to experience that. That's my belief.
Well, they sure do. And again, back to why I do what I do as a writer. A lot of it is about trying to communicate the essence of the outdoors and not only the values, associated with it, but just the way things are meant to be, our whole interaction with wildlife, with wilderness. And, whitetail hunting is one of those things that we share unanimously across North America. So that's certainly a passion.
Now, tell us a little bit about Canadian Outdoorsman TV, what it is, how you produce it, and where people can view it.
Yeah, you bet. It's actually an online show. My wife Heather and I have actually been hosts of a couple different shows over the years, network shows. But this one's an online show, CanadianOutdoorsmanTV.com, and you get it directly free of charge. Viewers can sign up and watch episodes anytime, anywhere, on any portable device, laptop, whatever. And simply by going to CanadianOutdoorsmanTV.com, registering with an email address, and you're good to go. Click and watch.
So what are they going to see? What type of episodes do you have? How many per year do you have?
Yeah, so we have several episodes up and running right now. Everything from turkey hunting to saltwater fishing to waterfowl hunting, even trapping episodes up there now. There's some stuff on whitetail hunting. Coming this next year, we've got some episodes in Namibia, doing an Africa hunt, probably a couple different Africa hunts. We've got something on actually this whitetail that I just shot. That'll come up this next year as well. So there's lots of different things, and even ice fishing if guys are into ice fishing. But so that's something that's available for viewers anytime, anywhere.
So it really is an outdoorsman. Whether you're running a trap line, predator hunting. I love the saltwater fish, and so if somebody says, "Man, I've never seen that," so vicariously they can jump on and see, wow, I've never been to Africa myself personally, and yet I could go to your show and say, hey, there it is on the ground. Here's what they're doing. And that's interesting, or I'm glad I could experience that. Is that what you're trying to accomplish with the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the outdoor media world for well over 2 decades. And, one of the things that I've noticed is our shows tend to focus on heroes or tend to focus on, me as the host, that kind of thing. And while you might see that directly with us, and you might see guests as well, our focus is more on how do you as a viewer do what we're doing. We're not about, and forgive the expression, but we're not about egos. We're about sharing the experience. And I think that's really the value that we bring to viewers through our show.
And that's one thing at Whitetail Rendezvous. We're close to 100,000 downloads since August 31st of 2015. And people, all the feedback I get, somebody will send me email, text, or just hit me on Facebook, and they say, it's the stories, it's the sharing and going places that I couldn't go otherwise on my mobile device, and I could be sitting in the car, I can be any place, and I can get a 30-minute segment, and some people say, man, it makes my day, and then I just smile. I mean, I light up when that happens, because I brought some of the outdoors and people like yourself, and I talked to Steve Rocco the other day from Pennsylvania, and his farm has been in the family since the 1700s. I said, your stone walls were built in the 1700s, weren't they? And he said, yeah, they were. Think about that. I mean, and you bring that stuff out, and I like that myself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think Schlachter does it best, bringing in history and culture into his shows. And we're trying to do a little bit of that ourselves.
Yeah, because we miss so much of that. And see, we're talking about hunting, right? Not so much. We are, but not so much. We're bringing a lifestyle and an adventure. And towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about the family experience. But right now, tell me about that wonderful buck you got with your bow this year. He's a gorgeous, mature buck.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's, my wife again and I both, we're pretty hardcore bow hunters. We outfit for whitetails as well, but here in Alberta, but, we tend to focus a lot on archery, and this one was taken in the Edmonton bow zone. A lot of guys will know and recognize the Edmonton bow zone. About 2 weeks prior to that, just immediately prior to our first estrus, I think it was right around the 9th or 10th, I had rattled in a real nice mid 170 class to 25 yards. But again, I was self-filming. I was just reaching over to turn on the camera, and I was in a deciduous tree and wide open, and he busted me. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, your heart just sinks, but that's one of the risks with filming, right? And especially filming yourself, but big bucks don't let you get away with a lot. But, so I lived through that one and kept hunting and had some clients in the next week. And then finally during the second estrus on the 22nd, I was in a tree stand myself and I said to Heather, I said, look, we're at our second round now. It's either going to happen the next couple of days or it may not. I said, as long as it's a mature, real nice, heavy buck, I'm going to take it. And sure enough, about 9 o'clock in the morning, I had a couple, I actually heard squirrels go off about 60 yards to the west of me. And I was in a little bit of a funnel, a pinch point, and in a spruce tree. And I thought, this could be something. So sure enough, I looked down and a couple does are coming through, and they're nicely separated. And I'm thinking, okay, they're not in a straight line. They're not going fast along a trail. They're just kind of browsing and moving through. I'm going to get ready, turn on the camera, and here we go. Well, sure enough, a few minutes later, this guy comes through, and, he's just a good, solid mid to high 140s, maybe 150. I haven't even put a tape on him yet. And just but nice and heavy, right? So he starts coming through, and I thought, oh, my goodness, he's coming exactly on the trail I wanted. So the does kind of bounced off, and he stood perfectly at 18 yards, broadside, facing the other direction, and I let the air out of him. Simple like that. He was in the viewfinder, and I thought, that's money in the bank. I'm taking the shot.
Oh, yeah. Did you double lung him?
You betcha. He only went, he bounced off 20 yards, struggled a bit, walked another 20, and that was it, tipped over.
And folks, when you listen to the show, I'm gonna give some props to Kevin right now. He double lunged the buck, so there was a lot of blood and everything. But in his photo, there's a little tinge around the lips and stuff. But he cleaned that buck up, so you could, that's the type of picture you want to do. And I sometimes get a little excited, let me just say it that way, when people how do I want to say it, Kevin? Don't respect, and it isn't that because you're happy you killed, but take that extra step. And especially if you want to be in the industry and start doing some things, take the extra step, have wipes, handy wipes and everything, and position the buck and position the picture. Because if you want to get into the outdoor industry, it's the pictures that sell and the words just fill in the blanks. Your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Oh, for sure. It's, and that's something that really takes a lot of effort. Excuse me. To take really good quality pictures takes a lot of time, and a lot of guys just don't have the patience. And that's really what it comes down to a lot of time, or the eye, really, making sure everything's clean. It's a bit of an oxymoron because you don't want the blood around the mouth, but really the perfect shot, you can't avoid it because that's a double lung. There's hemorrhaging, lots of blood, and that's the reality of bow hunting. The blood is going to come out of the mouth and the nose, and that's going to happen. But you clean it up as best you could, or best you can, and a little bit of Photoshop can clean up that blood. But the truth is, that's a real raw picture that I took there, and that's just that's just the way it is, and that actually shows that, like you said, that shows that there was a really good clean kill, and a good double lung hit on even a big whitetail. Rarely do they go more than 40 yards.
Yeah, because you just take them through the boiler room, everything shuts down, and I mean it's one of my guests he said when the world goes dark, I mean it just boom, it's over, and that's one of the thrills because it culminates months, years of experience, and that's the period on. That's how I like to say it. It's just the period on the experience. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about the joy of the hunt, the experience, what that means to you.
Yeah, again, back to the whole close encounter scenario with archery. It's my wife and I both rifle hunt a lot as well. We hunt with muzzleloaders. We pretty much do it all, but there's just something about that close encounter experience with archery and bow hunting that is almost unexplainable. You have to do it to really appreciate it. And, the joy of the hunt for us is certainly that close encounter, but for every success, and success meaning a closed tag, there's so many other successes, just enjoying the outdoors and being able to sit in a tree stand and watch deer after deer go by that isn't something you want to take. That's something that when we're rifle hunting, because we rifle hunt a little differently. We're mostly on the ground, and a lot of times it's farther shots or farther sightings and that sort of thing. So the interaction just isn't quite there. But again, it's all being in the outdoors, and it's just we live for it. It's a lifestyle. It's an appreciation, or gaining an appreciation through interaction, I guess is the right way to say that. And our kids, they're learning to do the same thing. To the point where my oldest daughter, she's had multiple opportunities to shoot bucks with a rifle, and she just won't do it until she finds one she really, really likes.
Now, I've heard that up in Canada in the bush, you do a lot of drives, rifle hunting. Is that the type of hunting you do? Or are you just, in funnels and pinch points or ag areas and waiting for the bucks to move through?
Yeah, no, we're talking about rifle hunting?
Yes.
Yeah, well, rifle hunting, there are guys that do deer drives. I see much less of it these days. As outfitters, we don't do that. As outfitters, we have folks sitting in blinds and in tree stands to some extent, for sure. And a lot of pinch points, a lot of elevated areas overlooking valleys in the woods. We rarely hunt ourselves on the edge of open fields, although a lot of local guys do. So they're working on that, early morning, late evening movement, whereas we tend to focus on rutting corridors, rub lines, scrape lines with lots of visibility, or pinch points where there's just, minimal places for them to go. So they have no choice but to go by your stand position. Yeah.
Now, you were talking about in bow hunting the first estrus and the second estrus, and what month is that? In November or October?
Yeah.
What's your timetable up in Canada?
Sure. So, like everywhere, the whole estrus cycle starts even as early as early September when they start losing their velvet. But, there's a whole phase that those bucks go through. But our estrus itself, the actual first estrus, when the first does are hot, typically happens almost universally, and it's based on, of course, photoperiodism. That happens typically, anywhere between the 11th and the 16th of November, and almost universally in the areas that we hunt, the 14, 15, 13, 14, 15 of November. Then there's that 8 to 10 day lull, and then all of a sudden between the 21st and the 25th of November, they go into a second round. So those that haven't been bred will go into estrus again, and that behavior becomes a little more localized from the bucks, but they hold tight to those does, and they'll follow them and until they can breed them. And then after that, of course, the world breaks open, and those really big bucks just start moving like crazy, trying to get last minute breeding in.
Right. And plus, after the rut, they need food. And that's why, food plots are, just everybody's become a farmer because they know that, high protein, high carbs is essential as they go into the winter. And your thoughts on food plots in Canada, does that work up there or not so much?
Well, certainly. Saskatchewan allows baiting, and by definition, a food plot is baiting here. We don't allow baiting in Alberta, so everything we do is free range. Quite honestly, to kill a big whitetail with a bow in Alberta is a big deal, because we cannot bait with mineral mixes, we cannot bait with alfalfa, we cannot bait with food plots. So if a farmer happens to have a good crop, like a pea crop, you may be in a really good situation because you're not baiting, but you can hunt kind of on that. Now, the difference is that, we've got 160 to sometimes full quarter section crops here. So, it's not localized cereal grains or anything like that. But we aren't allowed to bait in Alberta. So, I'm a bit of a purist. I'm real not my personal philosophy. I won't judge anybody that does it, but my personal philosophy is I just prefer not to hunt over bait.
And, we'll switch it up now. Cabela's Greg Severson sent me up to Saskatchewan a few years back, and it was a very interesting hunt. And we're going to talk about heading north of the border when it's cold, and this was 5 days at 22 degrees below zero. And the challenges that I had, one, staying warm, but the biggest challenge I had, because I knew the bucks were there. There wasn't any question about if I hung in, I was going to see a mature buck, 4.5, 150 plus buck, or I wouldn't. I mean, that's hunting. But as we talked in the warm up, I got challenged because they put me in a pop-up blind. It was completely dark, and I had to get on the radio as soon as the sun came up and said, I cannot sit here the whole day. So help me understand that, and help the listeners who, aspire or dream or have a goal on their bucket list. I'm going to Canada. I'm going to shoot a big buck in the bush. How do we get through that, or how do we prepare for that?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Everybody comes from a different place, and especially folks from the southeastern states where it's a little warmer. They have some challenges for sure adapting to the temperatures, but it's not uncommon for us to sit in 20 below temperatures. The coldest I sat for a week was 36 below, and that's Celsius, which I guess is pretty similar Fahrenheit, but that's insanity. I mean, quite honestly, I rattled in some of the biggest bucks I've ever seen in my life that week, but I couldn't get drawn on them because, 50 yards away, you'd try to draw and it was just so loud because of the cold. So finally I picked up my recurve and because I couldn't get my compound drawn on them in that cold temperature. But really, the only way to survive it and to get through it is to figure out ways to do it. Meaning, you layer up, and I mean layers. Like I think you told me, you feel like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man sitting on the stand. But and you need to practice. You need to practice drawing your bow with all those clothes on, and or rifle hunting. I say bow because that's mostly what we do. But even rifle hunting, it's kind of all the same, but dressing right, but it's a real mental game. especially in Alberta, we have a lot lower deer density. So you got a lot of long hours where you're not seeing anything and you're sitting there in that freezing cold, and hand warmers become your best friend. Toe warmers become your best friend. If you happen to have a blind, a little portable deer can take the edge off for sure. But it's a mental game for sure. But when that 10 seconds happens and he appears and you can make the shot, that makes it all worthwhile.
Let's stay right about hunting north of the border and talk about the size of the bucks. And when I arrived up in Pierceland, the farmer that I was hunting his land on says, Bruce, you're going to see probably yearling steers out there, and they're whitetails. And I go, and he says, that makes the horns look really small. And so I said, okay. And I had done some prepping and looked at pictures, blah, blah, blah. But when the first buck came through and mature deer, and I went, oh my goodness. I mean, the body of it was huge. And talk about that relationship and how you can set your mind when you first see your first large, Canadian whitetail.
Yeah, you bet it. We've had clients up, guests up that, they'll sit and they'll watch deer and have the same dilemma. And they say, well, it was this and this and this big and this wide. And was that a shooter? And for us, we're looking at it, we're saying, are you kidding me? That was not only a shooter, that was a giant. But it is a little bit confusing. Our body size is significantly bigger than southern strains. The biggest live body weight buck that I personally shot was about 400 pounds on a whitetail. Oh. And that was about a six or 7 year old. I can't remember. I think it was a 6-year-old whitetail. Only had a 170 frame, but it was just a giant of a body. Now our normal size, 4 and 5 year olds would be anywhere from 275 pound live weight to 300 pound live weight, maybe 350. But that 275 to 300 is kind of normal for us. Now you put that body size on decent antlers, all of a sudden, those antlers don't necessarily look huge. Whereas if you got a little 90 to 125 pound deer in Texas, and you got, 140 class antler, well, those antlers look enormous. So it is a little bit of a process, a learning curve for sure for our guests.
Yeah. And I can, the buck I finally did kill, I saw him, come from my left. He was coming out of the slash and coming up this cattail slough, which was knocked down so I could see him. And I went, holy fright, because he was just ice coated. I mean, just you knew he's been cruising, and just his whole body was ice coated, and you could see the steam coming out of his nostrils. And I started to get excited, and if I didn't do anything, he was going to come probably 50 yards from my hay bale blind, and it was exciting, and that's the perfect, video that, if I could have done that would have been perfect, because he just came right up, and he was, how they walk with their muscles, and they're sassy and they get attitude.
You bet, especially those big boys, yeah.
And so when that happens, I mean, and it's over so quick, and it was the fourth day of the hunt, and it was just a relief, the pressure and getting back to the mental game, because I had seen a lot of deer. I passed on a lot of bucks because I knew they just weren't, what I was looking for, a mature buck, but they were big animals. And then finally, when he came through, there was no doubt in my mind, his main beams are 21 inches, and just a gorgeous, 10-point frame. And, if I had let him go a couple of years, he certainly would have, made the book if that's important. And let me stop on that just a little bit, folks. Mature deer are where it's at. And Kevin and I in the warm-up talked about quality deer management. So we're going to spend a few minutes here talking about quality deer management. Kevin?
Yeah, for sure, quality deer management is a really big deal for us. And I think it needs to be for everybody. I told Heather, my wife, 15 years ago, I said, you watch, there's going to be a real movement in growing deer and actually managing deer. And sure enough, we've seen that trend over the last decade and a half, especially stateside. A lot of guys have taken it on here, but it's a very select group of people. Like a lot of places, a few years ago, we experienced a pretty significant die-off, and our deer population is bouncing back significantly now. We've got a high predator population, which is something we constantly work at addressing. We try to do our part with killing coyotes every winter and that sort of thing, but with that die-off came increased pressure for hunters to just shoot a deer, and instead of holding out for those big guys, because there's just not as many big guys as there used to be. Now, what we're seeing this year is, and finally, because we've had a couple really good winters, we saw a much higher number of 1 and 2 year olds, even 3 year olds. But those 4 and 5 year olds, of course, that would have been that class during that die-off 3 years ago. There's just not as many 4 and 5 year olds around now. So, trying to encourage people to hold off and really, just don't need to kill a deer. If a lot of guys, I guess they just do need to kill a deer, but from our perspective, the older the better.
And one thing that Quality Deer Management here in the States, that group, they're seeing a trend in the States here that people are just passing. And as I mentioned at our farm, that I've hunted the farm that I graciously was invited to 50 years ago, and they still let me come back. So we killed one of the nephews killed a 180 whitetail this year, the biggest we've ever taken off the farm. Eddie, the owner of the farm, took a 173 10 years ago, but we just never saw the bucks. And it's a 500 acre farm, and most of it's cropland, and it's just a quintessential Wisconsin dairy farm. But having said that, over the years, we've done some smart things, and the people who hunt are getting smarter and smarter. And I love high tine bucks, and I'll shoot a high tine buck, and anytime I can do it with my crossbow or muzzleloader or with my rifle, and but I'm holding off because I've seen some high tine bucks go, okay, don't shoot him. Because he's only probably 2.5, 3.5 years old. Let him grow, because let him grow, let him go and let him grow. And, it works. And to all the listeners, it's your hunt. And I talked to Brenda Valentine about this a lot. And she said, it's your hunt. It doesn't matter. In the end, it's your hunt and it's your harvest. But in long term, if you think long term, and that's what we should do as hunters, if you want to grow a mature herd and have a balanced herd, like QDMA organization talks about, you have to let those 1.5-year-old, 2.5-year-old, 3.5-year-old deer walk. And is that what you're kind of thinking about up there in Canada, Kevin?
Yeah, that's certainly been our philosophy and our approach, in the areas that we hunt. It's always a challenge as a commercial operator. Our goal is to help hunters reach their goals. And, some guys they don't really care about numbers. Other guys, it has to be a 190 or nothing. And, I always tell people, look, in the end, it's your hunt, like Brenda said. And in the end, you're the one that has to decide, are you going to be happy with that buck? And my whole approach has changed a little bit on that commercially, as long as we're not affecting our herd dramatically. And that's almost a little bit of a mixed message here. But I will tell clients that, if you are happy with that deer, you go ahead and shoot it. But then it's up to me to manage that property and say, okay, that's one buck. If it happens to be a younger buck out of there, we don't hunt that place anymore this year. So that's one buck out of there. But for the most part, I always try to encourage our guests and our resident hunters as well to focus on those 4 and 5-year-old deer. But you know what? Not every year can be a 180 deer anyways. If you're killing a 180 deer every year, chances are you're doing something maybe not in the gray area, let's say. I always say if you can kill a 140 plus every year, those big guys will follow every once in a while. But if you're doing a 140 every year with a rifle or a bow, you're doing something right.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So, Kevin, we're at 50 minutes now, and so do you have time to go on and do another segment, or are you
Sure.
need to cut it off?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we've got time.
Folks, this is Kevin has graciously agreed to continue to part 2. So this is the end of the part 1 with Kevin Wilson from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, who he and his wife Heather have Canadian Outdoorsman TV, and they also run Alberta Hunting Adventures. So part 2 will be coming up the next show. So Kevin, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Hey, don't miss part 2 of Kevin Wilson from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, talking about hunting those mature bucks in the Canadian bush. And it's a tough hunt. It's a mentally tough hunt. Physically, not so much. But when it's below zero for days on end during your hunt and you're not seeing a tremendous amount of deer, and that's just the way it is north of the border, Kevin will give you some tips so you can make it a great hunt. Stay tuned. He's got a lot of value content to share.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.